In this video, we're considering the what, why, and how, or how we actually record macros in a Microsoft Excel environment, or even in a more general Microsoft Office environment. Now, macros are essentially fancy chunks of code. They're code that will operate as we're editing and changing and doing things to our document. We can actually run them by pressing a button or a shortcut key, or they can be run automatically when a certain trigger addition has occurred. Now, they've got a whole lot of different functionality associated with them. We can, for example, automate highlighting and change cells automatically between different colors as we're typing in them. We can concatenate various things from various cells and create a result based on them. We can perform calculations, we can do triggers and set triggers up when something happens. We can create graphs automatically. We can also automate the filling in of documents and creation of documents, closing, opening, printing, deleting, renaming, and changing all sorts of document settings. So they're very powerful in that way to actually do things, particularly if it's a repetitive thing, do it many times for us. Working in an office environment where there's lots of paperwork, you'll probably identify things that are repetitive and that happen over and over again. This is the process, this is the way it's done. Well, you can use a macro to automate a lot of that and save yourselves and the company a whole lot of time. And do it more accurately as well, because there's less chance of mistakes when you're doing copy and paste sort of operations. So why do we actually use them? Well, some of these tasks can be very laborious. Filling in paperwork based on defined structures, and everything's filled in the same way, but you have to open 50 different documents. When I was working here as a curriculum fellow a few years ago when we were going through the design for learning process, I automated all of this and saved many weeks of manual, very labor intensive opening documents and closing them and copying one line out of here into here. It took a very long time to do it all manually. So all these sort of things and computations that happen over and over again, creating many copies of files so that you can create a file, create 50 different copies of that file, each with a different name, and fill them in each with customized data, for example, from an Excel spreadsheet. Something that's very powerful and something that we'll be doing in the labs. Also highlighting various things in files, and as people are entering data, the data and the file can move and can actually change and respond to them. For example, we can change the colors in cells and things as you're entering data. And essentially you're performing frequently performed tasks using these sort of macros. And a lot of it can be done with just a few lines of code, which is very, very handy and useful for us. Besides a few lines of code, another way we can do them is using recording. So we can record user operations and replay these or run them later. Where we're recording, it's essentially creating the code for us. We can go to the View menu, Macros, and Record Macro, and we can record new macro. It essentially learns what we do and then allows it to be replayed later. And we can use a shortcut key to replay this later, or we can insert a button on a taskbar to play this later. We'll now go through a very basic example of recording macros. From now on in, though, we'll really be actually looking at the code that we can use to automate and write these macros themselves. Now, there's all sorts of things that we could do when we're recording a macro, but let's come up with a simple example. Okay, in this macro, what we'll do is we'll copy some text, we'll change the color of the text that we've pasted it, we'll make it bold and italic and change the color of the text box as well. You'll notice in macros we've got an option here, use relative references. If we don't use relative references, it'll be absolute, so we'll be dealing on the cell we're working with. Normally we want to use relative references. So we'll say record macro, we'll give it a name like macro 2, we'll give it something that we can jump to, so Control Q. The macro name can't have any spaces in it. The shortcut key needs to be a letter, and so we'll say copy and paste 2 cells to right, bold, italic, red text, green cell. Okay, that will tell us what we're doing. We'll say Control W. There we go. So we'll copy it, Control C, paste it, Control V. Green cell, red text, bold, italic, and then we'll go to View and say Macro, stop recording. Now if we go somewhere else, we can go to here and we can say Control W, because that's what we saved it as. We can do it to any of those ones, and we can do it to here as well. Control W, and use that macro. It'll do all that for us. We can even say View Macros, and we can edit it and have a look what's actually there. And so we can see how it's actually recorded that macro, the cells that's selected, how it's changed the color of them, how it's made it bold, how it's made it italic, all of those sort of things. We'll get into that soon, and here we've got the keyboard shortcut and the comments here that are describing what's actually happening. So all very handy for us to know.